more than 100 unique styles of beer, each with their own set of ingredients, process, guidelines, history, and experience. If you're a beer lover, an industry leader, or somewhere in between, a better knowledge of beer style will improve your life and your work.
Welcome to A Sense of Beer Style, essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. I'm Julia Herz.
And I'm Jeremy Storton.
We're advanced Cicerones, beer judges, home brewers, and we're excited to guide you through the vast and wonderful world of beer styles.
And speaking of, let's talk about the style comparisons, Julia.
Yep, and I love the deliberate slow method. Jeremy is much slower talker than I. You'll hear us both be ourselves in these podcasts, and I really appreciate your deliberate slow nature. In the course of describing the commercial examples, I need to be slow because there's 4 of them, right? Again, to ground you, get your brain in the game. You're studying right now to serve these beers. It's Czech Lager. There's 4 different versions: Pale Lager, Premium Pale, Amber Lager, and Dark Czech Lager. So there are each, when it comes to style comparisons, going to have different styles really to compare it to. The easy no-brainer is Czech Pale Lager, which again is harder to find. Jeremy will talk about commercial examples. You can get some brewers in the U.S. that get it enough, but you pretty much need to be in the region of original brewing to find great fresh examples of it. And so style comparison of the pale is really kind of a mirror of the Czech Premium Pale, but it's just a lighter bodied version and a lower intensity version of the Czech Premium Pale. Then when you get to Czech Premium Pale, you're thinking about style comparison of really, a little bit darker, a little bit richer and then body than that German Pils. And I don't want to call German Pils a copycat style because it really has come on strong, but they're brother and sister, shall we say, in a respectful way. But you have to remember the Czech beers, because of that soft, low ion water with the low sulfate, low carbonate water, are just not as sharp in the bitterness, right? So commercial examples are like a German Pils, but they have a cleaner finish, softer bitterness to them, and softer mouthfeel. And then Czech Amber Lager, wow, we bounce to, and the style guidelines will take you through this. Basically more like a Vienna lager, but stronger, the Czech hop of that Saz hop profile that Jeremy talked about, of like low black pepper notes. Or it could be they even compare it to British bitter, but richer with more of a deep caramel character and a lot less hop essence, and bitterness going on there. Then you get to our friend, the Czech dark lager, keeping your brain engaged. If you are actually viewing us, if you're just listening, you maybe have a beer in your hand, or you're going to get your hands on one of these one days. But style comparison is the equivalent of, a Munich Dunkel from Germany, or a Schwarzbier, but not as much. The Schwarzbier is not going to have as much dark malt notes when you taste it. So that's the strata of comparison for other styles. And Jeremy, what are commercial examples that are commonly known for each of these beers?
And I'm so glad for you that I got this section, because I can't pronounce these to save my life.
I know. I was like, okay, perfect.
So I'll land on the grenade for this one for both of us. So when you look through these styles, most of these are names from the Czech Republic, and I will absolutely destroy them with not intentionally, but as they're hard to pronounce. I don't speak the language. But what you'll expect to see in the Czech Pale Lager, kind of like the Session Lager, one of the ones that it's found here in the U.S. is from Notch Brewing, their Session Pils. Let me just say this: there's lots of craft breweries around the U.S. And around the world. I'm not just the U.S., but around the world, that will make a Czech Pilsner or a Bohemian style Pilsner. Those are one and the same. And a lot of them are absolutely wonderful. There was, I think it was Urban Roots in Sacramento that had one that knocked my socks off. And they are very, very delightful when they're done right. But if brewers are trying to brew the style and not starting with very, very soft water, as is per the style, then it's just not going to come across well. But that being said, a lot of people will actually try and brew these. So if you can find a local craft version of them, then go out and try it and taste it and enjoy it. Because the challenge is getting some of these over from the Czech Republic to the U.S. Oftentimes there's some oxidated notes there where it just tastes like paper or wet cardboard. So when you taste a beer from the Czech Republic, just know that it may not be as fresh as it ought to be. And I've heard from very close, very reliable beer sources that you need to really get to the Czech Republic and taste them. But when we get to the premium pale lager, of course, Pilsner Urquell is the one that most of us know because it's pretty ubiquitous. And becoming even more prolific here, at least in the U.S., is Czechvar. But do know that if you are outside of the U.S. and you're looking for this, it is called Budvar. And this is due to that naming thing that's been happening for decades. But Czechvar and Budvar are the same brewery, but it's a fantastic story. I urge you to check it out. When we get to the
Czech, I will say that Budweiser is not even a pale comparison to this. It doesn't present itself any longer of the style. Mm-hmm. This commercial example that you're pointing to, Jeremy, is one of the original examples of the style, hands down. And it doesn't even merit getting confused with Budweiser, which is sold across the land, but does not represent Czech premium pale lager.
Because this comes from the town of Budweis, so therefore it is Budweiser, as my glass says Budweiser. But that's a different story for a different day. When we get to the Czech amber lager, again, these are all going to be, you've got to find craft breweries that are willing to go after these. Most of these are Czech, and the only one I can come close to trying to pronounce would be the Primator Polet Mavi. I got to look because I don't memorize these names. And the last one, when we get to Czech Dark, now granted, the Czechvar also has a dark and it is wonderful. I've had a few others that are not as in good a shape as this one. So this is one of them listed on the guidelines, but even Devil's Backbone, I'm going to pull out my memory. If I hope I'm not wrong, but I think that's out in West Virginia or somewhere on the East Coast. But they have some really excellent beer as well, and so they did, hopefully still do, make a dark Czech lager. But the commercial examples in this one are a little bit tough to learn and memorize, to be frank. But let's talk about ideal glassware.
So glassware, super approachable glassware, yet that's hard to find if you really do it right. I could see this beer being slung in many a pint glass, an American style shaker pint glass. Say no. Try to go with something that really does highlight the collar of foam, that allows you to hold the glass where you're not heating up and warming up the whole beer. These are really nuanced beers, 5 give or take % alcohol, less even 4%. So you don't want to heat it up too much by holding it. This is a speak allow, nucleation sites on the bottom type of glassware. I've looked at molecular presentations on the actual porosity of this glass. And this glass is an incredible example, pretty much made though for German pills, but serves itself very well for the Czech pale and premium head retention and way we want to enjoy this. Then you get to the branded glassware that Jeremy and I were both sent from Czechvar, and this dimpled almost. You'd think of it maybe as more of English style. I'm gonna love this mug, especially because it lets me hold the whole can, tall boy can, right? This is not a 12-ounce can of beer. It's 500 milliliters in one poured glass. It's going to support head retention. It's going to volatilize out that CO2 very aggressively with this open mouth. That's going to fill me up less and allow me to drink more, maybe actually squeak in a second or a third. So this would be in my view, a preferred glass for that dark Czech lager.
I've already noticed since we had these glasses sent to us after doing some test runs, being the crash test dummy of the beer world, and drinking beer out of this, I've noticed that I drink the more beer a little bit faster out of this mug, which is maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing, but I love having a nice heavy handled mug to drink a beer out of. It's
a heavy mug though.
Yeah.
Like for you literally have like how the Germans do Stein competitions. Yeah. This one full, super heavy.
Yeah.
This one, it's a different type of glass, right? This one much lighter, much more elegant and nuanced. This is made for beer halls and slinging back. I love them both. I love them both.
Although I think I'd rather have this mug in the beer holding contest where everyone else has the Moss instead. I think I'd rather have one of these.
Right. Totally. Totally.
But that's glassware. You should have a good glass for these beers because they are special. They appear to be simple, and when, like we said, when you dive in, they're a little bit less simple than you first thought. So get a good glass for them.
Yeah, excellent dialogue on that glassware, and then tied to glassware is definitely serving temperature. Both these beers are going to be made to serve at 38 Fahrenheit. If you're Fahrenheit centric, that classic calibrated temperature for most draft systems, and that's going to serve the beer best. Although don't be shy to let these beers warm up, particularly the dark Czech lager. As that warms up, you're going to get more of those licorice notes, more of those kind of dark cacao notes from that debittered malt. So, Jeremy, please take us to some statistics if people are studying this style and what the ranges tend to be for the whole grouping of these 4 individual beer styles.
Yeah, and of course we've talked about this before, but instead of just, I'm not good just remembering just a slew of numbers. I need to look at the patterns, and so when I studied this to pass the advanced Cicerone test, I looked at the Czech beer category as a whole and just saw how they fit together. And so when we're talking about the ABV, the Czech pale lager, the session, and I think of that as the session beer. So that's really the 3 to 4, 4.1 to be precise. So you could kind of think of that as the Czech beer light of the category, right? And then the way that fits in, then we get into the one that we all know and love, the Czech Premium Pale. Now we're at 4.2 to 5.8, so there's just a slight step between the two. But when we get into the Czech Amber and the Czech Dark, those are, for all intent and purpose, the same ABV. They're all 4.4 to 5.8, and Premium Pale is 4.2 to 5.8. So let's just say they're 4.5 to 6% as kind of like a generality. So the Premium Pale, the Amber, and the Dark are the same, but it's just that Session Light ABV is lighter. When we get into IBUs, they're all right in the ballpark of 20 to 35 IBUs, except for the Premium Pale. The one that we all know, the one that has more hop presence, has bitterness steps even above that. It's 30 to 45 IBUs. But remember, they're not harsh. It doesn't come through as challenging to our palate, but the bitterness units are there. But the pale, the amber, the dark, they're all basically the same IBU. So when you kind of memorize this as a category, the patterns are starting to form. At least they did for me. And then when we get into the SRM and the color, honestly, the Czech Pale and the Czech Premium Pale are virtually the same. There's a difference by like 0.5 SRM, which I don't even know why we acknowledge 0.5 SRM, because none of us are going to be able to say, ooh, that's 0.5 SRM off from what the style guidelines say. But as you would expect, when you get to the amber, now we're in amber range from 10 to 16, which is deep in the heart of amber. And when we get to dark, the Czech dark lager, then we're really getting into kind of stepping above that, where we go from kind of like a dark copper all the way to a pretty good, almost black. I mean, we're getting a very, very dark brown. So there's a huge range there. Talking about the original gravity. Again, this is not something you can really hang your hat on. I use it more to kind of predict what the alcohol is going to be, but we are really talking about, for the pale, the session, we're talking about the 1028 to 1044 for a specific gravity. And then the premium, the amber, the dark, they're all roughly the same, 1044 to 1060. So, you know, that kind of fits there. But final gravity is where I hang my hat. When we look at that final numbers, that's when we can dictate the body. We talked about mouthfeel earlier. That Czech pale lager is going to be lighter and a medium to light body. So 10.8 to 10.14. I use 10.10 as my kind of fence that I lean one side or the other on. And this covers that completely. When we get into the others, they're 1013 to 1017, so they are well into the teens. They're light, but they have a little bit of body, a little bit of presence. That's what the final gravity tells me. And that's what I get by looking at these stats, by having to memorize this stuff for some higher level beer test. These are the patterns that I found in studying the Czech beer styles. So that being said, let's get into something even more fun that you and I both love, Julia. What food would you pair with these beers?
We're going to round this out and bring you home on this group of beer styles. I mean, Czech Lager is really 4 individual beer styles, and 2 of the 4 are very different in very nuanced ways. So it's not a slam dunk pairing. But based on Jeremy's description of the ABV, alcohol by volume levels of low 4s to mid 5s, we've got a lot to work with, but yet we don't want the beer to be barreled over for intensity. Traditional rye bed in Prague and the Czech Republic is what this is served with often. Pickles and a certain type of cheese indigenous to the area. So it can certainly stand up to lighter cheeses, and acidity will certainly be a fun experiment, although I don't see that working as well with the amber lager and the dark lager as much as the premium and the pale. Put this with your sessionable dishes that are not big evenings of gluttony. Put it with lighter chicken, lighter pork, not your duck and beef Wellingtons. You don't want to overpower this beer. But yet, when you want to have some links and hooks and echoes that mimic grilled, roasted, and smoked protein and the process that they are exposed to due to a higher heat preparation, go with your dark lager or your amber lager over the premium and the pale.
And for me, these are fantastic food pairing beers because they're light and easy drinking. I can drink them, but they actually have that body like we talked about, that I could drink these with almost anything. With the premium pale, this Czech I have in my hand, to go with, I'd want to go with something fried as my first instinct, because you have those bridges between this wonderful malt flavor and the Maillard reaction of fried food, but then you also have the hops to come in there with like their black pepper and kind of really contrasting with the salt and just really melding together really well. I think having these with like a chicken pot pie or even like a Thanksgiving dinner, something where there's complexity, and you want something that can stand up to all of that, but add and it really add to it, but not get overly complex. These beers are perfect for that sort of thing. I think when I think about the dominant flavors coming through, particularly in that premium pale, and kind of I think about those fresh, delicious buttered buns coming out of the oven. Any meal that I would want to have some just wonderful homemade bread with, then this beer would go with that meal. And that for me is just a simple way to put it.
I totally love it. And now that everyone listening or watching is hungry and thirsty, I'm gonna close this out for us and say thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style on this amazing grouping of beers for Czech Lager.
But for this episode, I have to say na zdraví.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style, the essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. With advanced Cicerones, me, Julia,
And me, Jeremy.
Tune into the next episode as we continue exploring the world of beer styles and what to make of them. We encourage you to listen to the prepisodes to build your foundation and better understand beer styles.
And before the next episode, I'd like to ask you to review the show and let us know what you'd like featured in upcoming episodes. Until next time, here's to you and your sense of beer style. Thank you for listening. Cheers.